So the XT and X Pro line of cameras are now really well established, along with their beautiful X series lenses. But which would you go for? So welcome back to Photo Fad, and I'm delighted to be able to make this little video on my XT and X Pro series cameras, and just to see how they compare, and if I was choosing again, if I could go for one camera, which one I'd go for. Well, if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I've owned several Fujifilm cameras, and Fuji really do make cameras that inspire you, make you fall in love with the art of photography all over again. The X Pro 3 is a beautiful camera, and I've made a separate video on that previously. So you might want to look back at my previous video on the X Pro 3. It really is a super camera, and I enjoyed using it. Unfortunately, I did develop a recognized problem with the X Pro 3. So when looking through the viewfinder, I can show you on the perhaps on the X Pro 1, when I look through the viewfinder, the screen would look okay, but the viewfinder would look all milky and cloudy, and that was a recognized problem with the some of the earlier models of the new X Pro 3, which I think they've ironed out. It was a recognized manufacturing fault. I have to say that my experience with Fujifilm as a company is that they are an outstanding company who offer amazing customer care and support. But because these cameras aren't cheap by any means, it did disappoint me. And I sent the camera back to the place I purchased it from, and I was given a refund. And then I was in a position to think, well, what do I do? Do I go for another X Pro 3, or do I have a little think, put my money aside for a while, and think what I'm going to try and get instead? I never really changed my mind about Fujifilm, despite the problem I had with the camera. And also because I'd really committed myself to these wonderful lenses for the Fuji system. Here's the 23mm 1.4, which is a fantastic lens for low light settings. I recently invested in this telephoto zoom, the 55-200, and my trusty and very reliable 18-55 lens, which is a fantastic lens. You've probably seen lots of videos about this. It's a kit lens, but really it's far superior in quality to any kit lens that you get with any other camera. So I had all these lenses, and I also use legacy lenses, as you've seen in my previous videos, with these cameras with appropriate mounts. So you'll probably also realize that I own this X Pro 1. I've owned it from 2012, and I'd really never get rid of it. So it occurred to me, for the way I photograph, it would probably be better if I just used my X Pro 1. I didn't really need the X Pro 3. I mean, don't get me wrong, the X Pro 3 will kick this older sibling's bottom in terms of autofocus speeds and function, but it really depends on how you intend shooting. Now, those of you who followed the development of the X Pro 3 will know that Fujifilm have tried to really focus on the quality of their camera. But I would actually challenge that and say that it's the X Pro 1 that probably has the best build of them all. It's an outstandingly built camera. I mean, it's really lasted a good few years with me so far, and I've taken it everywhere and used so many different lenses on it, and it's brilliant. I mean, the build quality is fantastic, and I think, for me, I think the build quality on the X Pro 1 is even better than the X Pro 3. So it was quite clear that Fujifilm wanted to make a camera out of the X Pro 3 that almost had that Leica type quality about it, something that echoed refined photographic satisfaction. And I have to agree that that's sadly been lost in the era of most of the new digital cameras. I remember when the first SLRs and other cameras came out, I was really put off by their look. having used lots of beautiful film cameras in the past. And Fujifilm have really captured that for the amateur enthusiast and also perhaps for the professional. Although I do realise that it's about form and function. And if you're a professional photographer, then you may be looking for something else. But as far as I'm concerned, if I want to pick up that camera and I want to use it and I find it attractive and it feels good in my hand, then I'll be out there taking pictures and enjoying it. But I think they went a bit overboard, Fujifilm. They started, as you're probably aware, cladding it in titanium, trying to make it effectively bulletproof, that it will stand the test of time. They were trying to attract those with a passion for build quality, I agree, style and beauty, but perhaps a little overboard. Because if you think about these cameras, I mean, they all eventually get dated. Yes, they will probably, some digital cameras will become collector's items, but really, I think probably investing in the lenses is going to be more important, because any camera, digital camera that you buy now, 4 or 5 years from now, is going to be more advanced. And the question is, how much more advanced can they become and how much more do we need? Coming back to that titanium finish on the camera, I did like it, I have to say. I quite like the look of it. And the titanium finish really left a lot of fingerprints. Now, that didn't bother me too much, but I know a lot of people on the internet didn't like that. I find it very difficult to clean off. And then you've got to think then, why does it need to have a titanium finish? I mean, are you going to be hammering nails into the wall with your camera? You know, probably not. And if you really are worried, not obsessive, do what I do. I mean, I'm partially obsessive and I always buy these half leather cases. This is a TP one from a company in China. It's fantastic. They cost about £45 compared to some of the original half leather things that you can get. And I've had this one on for years. The beauty of it is that with regards to the tripod mount, they've got these nice brass screws and the tripod mount goes into there, so you're never damaging the base of your camera. And of course, that was the idea with the X Pro 3, that it's going to be resistant to damage. And you can see when I invested in the XT4, after I thought long and hard about getting it, I also made sure that I put one here. This is the only area that can really get damaged. I mean, up here, it hardly takes any knocks or bangs. So what I'm trying to say is that investing a lot of money into something that probably is unnecessary, you know, it requires a bit of thinking. And how much money do you want to spend just because a camera's got a titanium finish? I suppose if money's no object, I'd say again, I'd get both. So I now own this XT4 and I'm really thrilled about it. I couldn't really ask for a better camera. The build quality on this, now many might argue with me, but I actually think for a camera like this made in China compared to the X Pro 3 that's made in Japan, I think that really makes very little difference. The compartment doors and everything are, in my opinion, more solid than on the X Pro 3. Okay, perhaps it was just the X Pro 3 that I had. It also comes with a rather nice shoulder strap, but you know, quite a good quality one for a camera accessory. The old Fujifilm straps were just sort of thin things. This is pretty good, but I still prefer to use it with my own little rope or string shoulder strap. I find that much easier just to wrap around my hand like this a few times, and it's out of the way when I'm taking pictures on the street, whereas, you know, a big, wider, bulkier strap makes it more difficult. Now onto the screen. And you're probably thinking, where's the screen? Well, this is how I like to use it. Just like the X Pro 3, the issue with the flip-out screen on this XT4 did polarize a lot of people. People thought, well, you know, this is not the screen I'm used to. I'd rather have one that's on the XT3 that just sort of comes out. You pull up and out. But I found that. I did own the XT3 as well, not for very long, but I didn't like that. I found that it was a bit cumbersome to pull out and up. and it took a while. And also, as you're looking down at it, the screen was often covered by this eye cup on the viewfinder. I think that this screen is probably the best way that they could have configured it on this camera for everyone. It's a versatile camera. You can vlog with it, you can take street shots, you can take beautiful landscape. Of course, I think if you're just going to be doing waist level shots in the street, then perhaps the version on the X-T3 might be a little bit better for you, but you know, each to his own. I think I prefer this. But one thing that people don't mention about it is this: no screen at all. Now you may be thinking, what on earth is he talking about? But for people like me who come from the era of film photography, I don't like to be distracted by a screen. I don't like all those smudges on the screen. I don't like the fact that it can be tweaked, the autofocus spots, etc. And if you're thinking, well, how does he review his image? Well, I don't like to chimp as much, but I do chimp. I mean, a lot of us do. You can, on this camera and any of these X cameras, customize the buttons. So there's a play button here, okay? And you can review your images on the screen or in the viewfinder. But what I do is I ascribe, or I set the play button to here as well. So you take a shot, and then review it. Take a shot and then review it. And you're taking a shot and reviewing it by pressing the review button here, the play button with your middle finger, taking a shot with your index finger, and just looking everything through the viewfinder. In fact, I would argue that this is the only way that you should shoot if you're doing documentary or street work, because you don't miss a beat. You can review if you want to review, you don't have to review if you don't want to. But I still have this beautiful screen that I can use this way, or I can use this way, or I can twist out, or I can use as a standard screen on any camera. I have a choice, and this is the thing that this camera's allowed me. It's allowed me the choice to do exactly what I want. And in terms of size, it can be as small as this with this 27mm lens, or I can attach a huge lens. Now, the X Pro cameras will also take these big lenses, but they look a little bit more out of place, a little more unbalanced. I mean, this is a legacy lens, a Nikon lens that I've used on this particular camera, and it seems okay, and that size is great. But putting one of these lenses on this, I think looks a bit too big. The other advantage, of course, with the Fujifilm X-T4 is that this lens mount here is reinforced. So putting bigger lenses, it'll take the strain. And it does feel much heavier than the, I say much heavier, it feels a bit heavier than the X-T3. It's not gonna cause you too much upset carrying it. Definitely feels nicer in the hand, and this grip is amazing. And in fact, coming back to this leather half grip or half case, it makes it even nicer to hold. And the other thing I would say, if you're obsessive about your cameras and you don't want it to wear, then this is the area that tends to wear on the leatherette or plastic here on the camera. And I can tell you that with these half leather cases, the thing lasts a lifetime, unless you're putting on extra batteries or whatever you call it, accessories on the base of the camera. Some people will prefer the X Pro line. Some people are going to want the XT. But for me, having used many of these cameras and owned quite a few of them now, I would say that if I was going to choose one, I would choose the X-T4 without doubt. It's a much better all-rounder. As I've said, it can be as minimalist as you want, or it can be as elaborate as you want. Just one thing that I would say about this screen is just be careful when you are maneuvering it, because it can go into different angles. Sometimes it rubs against the body of the camera, and it can leave marks on the frame of the screen there, the plastic frame, but that's really a very small consideration given the versatility of the screen on this camera. Now, one thing that has irritated me about this camera is that it arrives with only a charger that you can charge through the actual camera itself. So I've had to invest in this charger. Now, I resented that a little bit because they are expensive, they're about 60 quid, but then you do get a very nice charger with a visual display here. And I also thought, what the hell, let's get an extra battery as well, but that's another 60 quid. Now, the batteries are much bigger than the old Fuji X Pro or XT batteries. I'll just demonstrate this case to you. Can you see how nice it is? You open and your battery compartment, you've got access to it without having to remove the leather case. And that's both on this one and on the XT4. Just open it like that and you've got access to the battery. But if you look at the batteries, it's a much bigger battery now for the XT4. So if you're buying the XT4, remember that all the batteries will be different, they'll be bigger, but they last a lot longer. But it's always nice to have a spare battery. Now, one thing I don't like to do is to charge through the camera, because you're charging across the electronics of the camera. And someone had told me that, in fact, a few people have reported that if there's a surge in electricity, it could damage your camera, and of course you won't be covered for that. It could damage the electronics. So it's much nicer to have a charger, and it would have been a nice touch for a camera. It's about £1,500 for them to include a charger, particularly as it's a new battery system. The XT4 only has a electronic viewfinder and the screen, but you know what? I really don't miss at all the optical viewfinder. I rarely ever use it on my X Pro 1. I do like to use it sometimes though. I really do like to use it, and that's what many of the X Pro enthusiasts say, is that they like to have it, but they don't use it as much. So I don't miss it. And of course, that's what bumps up the price on the X Pro 2 and the X Pro 3. They cost a lot of money to make these optical viewfinders. But one thing you've got to remember is that if you are using the wider lenses on the X Pro 3, you're not going to see the viewfinder lines. They're going to disappear. So I think anything less than 28 mil, you're not going to see. I think I'm right about that, 28, 24 mil. On my X Pro 1, I can see those lines. And if I want my fix of an optical viewfinder, then I'll just use my X Pro 1. So the way I use my X Pro 1 is really with perhaps this lens or a smaller lens, or the 23 mil 1.4, or I use some of my legacy Leica or Nikon lenses. So for me, it's not an issue. But of course, if you're going to want to be a little bit more expedite and want the most updated autofocus and be a bit more technical, perhaps do some wedding photography, I think this will be a bit slow for you. But I would really think hard about why you want an X Pro 3. You can pick these up for almost next to nothing now by comparison second-hand, although they still hold their value and they're still quite expensive. By the way, as gorgeous as the image quality is straight out of the camera for all these Fujifilm cameras, many still swear by the files that come out of the X Pro 1. You know, hailing it as the closest likeness to a truly film photo quality result. But for me, JPEGs from all these Fuji cameras are universally amazing. So classic chrome and Eterna probably being my favorite, although many rave about classic negative. And of course, Fuji knows that this is all about the experience. You know, they're pulling on the heartstrings of people who've seen old film pictures or have used a lot of film cameras, and they have got it absolutely right with their JPEGs. So they want you to get out there, you know, have a joyous sort of tactile experience and relationship with your camera, and get JPEG appeal that does not require hours of fiddling in post or Lightroom. So the most that I would generally do with my images is crop and adjust the brightness, shadows. I don't do much more. So even my landscape work is done with Lee graduated filters and neutral density filters. I don't own Lightroom or Capture One or any other software for post-production. I think this setup, to be quite honest, although this is probably heavier than the X Pro line or the other Fujifilm XT cameras, this is pretty neat and small. You know, considering you've got an amazing system here, putting on a 27mm lens or even the 23mm f2, something like that, is perfect for street photography. And even this 18-55 is not huge, and it takes absolutely amazing pictures, and it's got optical image stabilization. And of course, I forgot to say that one advantage of this X-T4 over the X-T3 is that it has optical image stabilization built in. Of course, the X-T4 can be used for street photography. It's a bit heavier than some of the other X-T cameras, but just to compare in size, here's the little Ricoh GR, so it's much easier to carry something like this. But for some reason, although this takes amazing pictures, I still prefer to walk around with the X-T4. Just with a turn of the knob here, you can go from stills photography to video photography without altering any of your settings. And who knows, I mean, I've not really been one for videos, but this is something that might open doors for me. I might want to do more video photography with this. I do landscape photography, but having a screen like this that I've never had before, being able to tilt it in any direction, will make me probably want to get out there and do more landscape work, and I've already been doing some with this camera. So at the end of the day, whichever X camera you choose, I can guarantee you won't be disappointed. And if I had my way, I'd have both the X Pro 3 and the X-T4. But if you want versatility, and if you're going to choose one, then my opinion would be the X-T4. But it's up to you. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, which means a lot to me. Thanks a lot. See you in the next one.